There is a sedge that produces up to 80 nutrient-dense tubers from a single seed. It thrives in parched, sun-scorched soils where modern grains wither and fail. It offers more heart-healthy oleic acid than the finest olive oil and more prebiotic fiber than almost any cultivated starch in the human diet. For over 6 millennia, this resilient survivor nurtured the cradle of civilization, serving as the gold of the Pharaohs and a foundational staple for empires across Africa and the Mediterranean. Then, the architects of industrial agriculture arrived. They rebranded this ancient provider as a noxious weed and a biological invader. This is the story of Chufa, the public enemy number 1 they tried to erase. To the botanist, it is Cyperus esculentus. To the traditional farmer, it is the tiger nut or earth almond. But to the modern industrial complex, it is simply yellow nut sedge, a target for eradication. Welcome to Forgotten Food Chronicles. I am your lead researcher, and today we are digging beneath the surface of modern agronomy. We are uncovering how a plant that once built empires became the subject of a multi-billion-dollar herbicide campaign, and why its return is the key to a truly regenerative and resilient future. The story of Chufa does not begin in a laboratory or a modern seed catalog. It begins in the sun-drenched silt of the Nile River Valley. Archaeological excavations at sites like Wadi Kubaniya reveal that as far back as 16,000 years ago, long before the rise of domesticated wheat or barley, indigenous hunter-gatherers were already harvesting these tubers. By the time of the Egyptian dynasties, Chufa had ascended to a status of high reverence. We find dried tubers carefully placed in sarcophagi, provisions for the afterlife, and depicted in tomb paintings as a primary ingredient in honey-soaked cakes. To the ancients, this wasn't a weed. It was a biological insurance policy. Across West Africa and into the Maghreb, Chufa served as a bridge crop. When the rains failed and the sorghum or millet withered, the Chufa remained. Its secret lies in its botanical architecture. Unlike annual grains that gamble their entire life cycle on a single season of rain, this sedge builds an underground fortress. Its dense network of rhizomes and tubers acts as a subterranean anchor, stabilizing fragile soils against wind erosion and creating micro-pockets of moisture retention. In the traditional dehesa systems of the Mediterranean and the polycultures of the Sahel, Chufa was a cornerstone of nutrient cycling. It didn't just take from the earth. Its root exudates stimulated soil biology, turning hard-packed dirt into a thriving ecosystem. When we look at the data, the primitive nature of this crop reveals a sophisticated nutritional profile that puts modern staples to shame. While a field of corn requires massive nitrogen inputs and heavy irrigation to produce a starch-heavy yield, Chufa produces a harvest rich in phosphorus, potassium, and vitamin E with a fraction of the water. It is a rare, complete food, providing the carbohydrates of a potato, the healthy fats of an avocado, and the fiber of a legume, all in one small, wrinkled package. In ancient Spain, the Moors refined this into horchata de Chufa, a medicinal milk that sustained the body and cooled the spirit. These cultures understood a fundamental ecological truth. True food security isn't found in the height of a stalk, but in the resilience of the root. They cultivated Chufa not because it was easy to mechanize, but because it was impossible to kill, ensuring that even in the leanest years, the earth would always provide. The fall of Chufa from a sacred staple to a biological invader was not an accident of history. It was a calculated byproduct of the Green Revolution. The turning point arrived in the mid-20th century, as agriculture shifted from the diverse, hand-tended polycultures of our ancestors toward the high-input, mechanized monocultures of the industrial age. In this new world order, efficiency was measured by how easily a crop could be harvested by a machine and how effectively a field could be cleared of anything that wasn't a patented seed. Because Chufa is a perennial-style sedge with a tenacious spreading root system, it became the ultimate obstacle to the clean rows of corn, cotton, and soybeans. By the 1960s and 70s, institutions like the USDA and various university agronomy departments began publishing literature that officially rebranded Cyperus esculentus as yellow nut sedge, labeling it one of the world's worst weeds. The motive was clear: profit and control. You cannot easily patent a plant that has been grown freely for 10,000 years, and you cannot easily sell a specialized harvester for a crop that grows in dense subterranean mats. However, you can sell the solution to a problem. Agrochemical giants recognized that Chufa's natural resilience, the very trait that allowed it to survive the Sahara, made it a perfect villain for their marketing campaigns. The mechanisms of erasure were brutal and systemic. Millions of dollars in research funding were diverted away from Chufa's nutritional potential and toward its total eradication. This birthed a multi-billion-dollar industry centered on specialized herbicides like S-metolachlor and glyphosate. Farmers were told that the presence of this weed was a sign of failure, a biological threat that would steal nutrients from their subsidized corn. In reality, Chufa wasn't stealing nutrients. It was building soil structure that the heavy machinery was destroying. But the narrative held. Across the American Midwest, the Mediterranean, and even parts of Africa, the Public Enemy #1 campaign forced farmers to poison the very ground that once offered them a drought-proof harvest. The consequences of this erasure have been devastating. By replacing a resilient, nutrient-dense perennial with thirsty, chemical-dependent annuals, we have traded long-term ecological stability for short-term caloric volume. We lost a primary source of resistant starch, a critical prebiotic that modern diets are desperately lacking, and replaced it with inflammatory corn syrups and processed oils. Culturally, the connection was severed. The knowledge of how to process and enjoy the Earth Almond was buried under layers of weed control manuals. We didn't just lose a plant. We lost the wisdom of how to eat in harmony with a changing climate. The industrial complex didn't hate Chufa because it was useless. They hated it because it was too independent. It didn't need their fertilizers, it didn't need their massive irrigation pivots, and it certainly didn't need their permission to grow. In the eyes of a monoculture-obsessed system, a plant that provides for free is the most dangerous enemy of all. Despite the decades of chemical warfare waged against it, Chufa remains. In the cracks of industrial soy fields and the margins of neglected pastures, its tubers wait. A silent, subterranean resistance. Today, the marginalization of Chufa persists, not because of a lack of utility, but because of systemic barriers. Our global food system is built on the big three: wheat, rice, and corn, which receive the lion's share of government subsidies and infrastructure. There are no massive grain elevators for Chufa. There are no specialized combines at the local dealership designed to sift its small, wrinkled tubers from the soil. To the industrial mind, if it cannot be processed at a scale of millions of tons per hour, it does not exist. Yet, a redemption is quietly unfolding in the laboratories of nutritionists and the fields of regenerative pioneers. Modern science is finally validating what the Pharaohs knew. Chufa is a superfood in the truest sense. Recent studies have highlighted its high concentration of resistant starch, a type of fiber that bypasses the small intestine to feed the beneficial bacteria in our gut microbiome. In an era of skyrocketing metabolic disease, Chufa offers a low-glycemic, anti-inflammatory alternative to processed grains. Furthermore, carbon sequestration data is revealing that Chufa's dense, perennial-like root mats are far more effective at locking carbon into the soil than the tilled, bare earth systems of annual monocropping. The revival is being led by a global network of renegade farmers and permaculturists. In the food forests of the American South and the agroecological plots of West Africa, growers are integrating Chufa into polycultures. They aren't fighting the weed, they are harvesting the solution. By planting Chufa beneath fruit trees or alongside nitrogen-fixing legumes, they create a multi-story harvest that requires zero herbicides and minimal irrigation. These practitioners are proving that Chufa is the ultimate climate change crop. It thrives in the heat, survives the flood, and builds soil health while feeding the community. For the viewer at home, the redemption of Chufa starts in the garden and the kitchen. It is one of the easiest crops to grow in a small container or a backyard patch. Simply soak the dried tubers, plant them in a sunny spot, and watch as the weed transforms your soil. You can blend them into a creamy probiotic horchata, grind them into a gluten-free flour that tastes of toasted almonds, or eat them raw as a high-energy snack. We are moving past the era of weed control and into the era of ecological partnership. The redemption of Chufa is a reminder that the most resilient solutions are often the ones we were told to kill. By bringing this ancient survivor back to our tables, we aren't just eating a forgotten food, we are reclaiming our place in a regenerative cycle that the industrial age could never truly break. The crisis of our modern food system is not a lack of calories, but a lack of resilience. As our soils deplete and our climates shift, the public enemy of the industrial age reveals itself as the savior of the next. Chufa teaches us that true strength is found in persistence, that nutrient density can thrive in scarcity, and that no weed is ever truly a waste. It lives in the seeds kept by elders and remains buried in the very soil we were told to poison, waiting for us to remember. This is Forgotten Food Chronicles, where we uncover the ancient ecological wisdom modern institutions try to erase. If you believe in reclaiming our food sovereignty, subscribe, like, and share this investigation. Tell us in the comments, what other weeds are you ready to bring back to the table?